Well, this is very much of an opportunistic video. I wasn't expecting to do this today, so here I am. And what I want to talk about is opportunities, collaboration, interaction, and some friends of mine. I wrote this as a Facebook post this Sunday after my wife came home from a Quaker meeting. And she talked with Mark Helpsmate, one of the prominent local Quakers who is interested in many of the same things that I am, about possible ways that we might be able to collaborate. Now, Mark and I are kind of like two elephants in a room, and there's not always room for two of us at once. Nevertheless, I have a great deal of respect for his work, and he had mentioned Spirit Radio, which I had been looking forward to getting to listening to and reviewing and doing stuff on, because I spent a lot of years in Madison doing community radio and community television, and this is an extension of it. So I wrote this on Sunday morning. It's about 212 words, and there's a kind of a cute typo in there. And this is also will have to do with some work I'm doing on Buddhism for Dr. Pache. And guess what I found out? I found out this morning, this Sunday morning, a few days ago, that who was on Northern Spirit Radio but Dr. Pache. He's a professor at UW-Eau Claire in the English department, and he's very generous in terms of giving me the necessary time to do the work I need to do for him. So I wrote this. Today, the Sunday morning and early afternoon, I can say in the words of the great Roman Catholic Bishop Fulton J. Sheen, that the Northern Spirit Radio Show lifted up my heart, and I am proud to know both Mark Helpsmate and Joe Pache, and have the honor of doing academic work with Pache. May the Spirit bless both of you. I think I said the Spirit's breast, and I'm going to leave that in, even if it is a typo, because it's kind of funny. So I will keep it. Pache, I want you to know I've had a huge breakthrough doing John Keats and Buddhism and a Buddhist emptiness in the Ode on the Grecian Urn. I would add that it's not so much how the swans came to the lake, as we talk about it in the book on American Buddhism, but that the swans may have come across the Atlantic a millennium ago with the Phoenicians, with the Vikings, who knows what. But I think that the point is that the swans were always there and we just didn't necessarily know it. Part of our enlightenment is that we recognize what exists behind the mask. And this show sort of got me into a way of thinking about continuing to do the work on Ode on a Grecian Urn. I feel like I'm on a track of an opportunity that's so profound that I'm struggling to get the language to express them. And that's the problem that we always face. We need to express in language what cannot but must be expressed in words. Or as you point out in the show, and did such an excellent job on it, not only words but in music at the same time. Now, Pache, you talked about some friends that were no longer on this earth, and how your work was part influenced by your experience with them. I have such a friend who has driven me by his way too early death in Vietnam to do just about everything that I've done. His name is Bob Casperson, and I almost use the present tense because though he died in Vietnam in 1967, sometimes I feel as if he's with me, and like they said in the end of Private Ryan, he's asking me to go out and have a good life, and that's sort of what he said to me in my dreams. Well, speaking of that sort of thing, I was going to do a paper this weekend at the UW System Women's Studies Conference on malignant hypermasculinity on a personal, geopolitical, military, and global sense. But we ended up not going down for reasons that it was just too much travel. And I feel now that the subject is more complex than I had written in the original abstract, or perhaps than I had expressed in the first paper I had done for you online, Pache. What I mean by this is one of my fellow boys of summer, Gary Moore, found a picture of our friend Bob Casperson in uniform taken shortly before he was killed in Vietnam. And along with that picture was a postcard that Bob Casperson had sent to my friend Denny Moore from Los Angeles in 1965 when he was out visiting another boy of summer, Don Kaveny, who at that time was running a Jack in the Box franchise. But what was interesting about the postcard was the handwriting was beautiful. And it was a message telling Denny what Bob was doing, but also mentioning to Denny's younger brother, Gary, who's now one of my spiritual partners, and now 68 years old, 5 years younger than us, to continue to work out if he wanted to be a good wrestler. And so what you see there is kind of a calculus of caring that almost goes beyond each of our individual memory. I want to talk about a couple other films now. I want to switch way out and say that I had discussed with UW film professor Christian Thompson the movie Dunkirk. And I was upset by her contention that people who saw Dunkirk wouldn't know what Dunkirk was about. But so I watched it again, and I gave it what you call a critical view. And what it was really about, more than anything else, and she was right, was bringing a bunch of soldiers home. It was about rescuing them from certain death by a whole society who got them out of Dunkirk when the entire Republic of France was about to fall to the Nazis in 1940. And then I said to my wife out of nowhere, I said, it's amazing to think that Hitler at the Battle of Stalingrad 3 years later abandoned a much larger army to freeze to death and be captured by Russians than had been rescued by the British at Dunkirk. Now, what I've sort of done here is when I've told you about these two things, comparing Stalingrad and Dunkirk, or North America for that matter, is to say that there were qualitative and quantitative differences between the way the combatants cared not only about their soldiers, but their civilians during the Second World War, and we should never forget it. And that's one of the reasons I'm working on a screenplay on a World War II air raid. Now, when I rather than talk about that, I'm going to get small again, and I'm going to look out my window, and we have I forget what they call a tribe of rabbits, but we have a lot of rabbits running out in our backyard. And during the Second World War, Winston Churchill had this great idea that they would have victory rabbits, and that the British people would raise these rabbits, and then of course they would be sources of supplementary protein. But what happened, of course, was they raised the rabbits and nobody wanted to kill them, and so the Britain became crawling with victory rabbits. There's little things like that, little human parts of it make such a difference when you think about conflict. Nobody wants it to happen, but once it gets out of control, how do we treat the survivors? How do we treat the enemy? How do we react? How do we punish the guilty? These are all valuable things that work into a curriculum. It's strange because I also was on the phone a little earlier with my friend Joe Kazas, another one of my friends of a lifetime, another one of the boys of summer. And Joe is so motivated by an option offered to him. Joe is Polish and is from a Polish immigrant family, that he's taking a Polish history course at UW-Madison as an auditor. And since this is one of my areas of specialism, I'll always call Joe up and he'll spend 20 minutes telling me he's too busy to talk to me, and we'll talk about Polish history. And in the process of talking about Polish history, the subject of a particular Polish bomber called a P-37, which was a not intercontinental but a 4-engine bomber, came up. And I looked up the statistics on it and some film of it in flight. And this is going to have a way of working its way into a screenplay project I'm working with some other parts of my team. So what we have here is kind of an accidental confluence of things where I'm going to reach out to both Mark and Joel and say, I'd love to have you both doing a video with me. We could sit at a table and interrupt each other and people would probably think we were the Stooges or something. But I'm extending that invite out, and I think we can capture motion, and we'd love to have you breakdance for Phil's video channel. And as I say, this is because I was ready to go, we did a show. If you have something for me to review or you'd like to send some support, I'd love to have it.